About a week ago, something unsettling happened. I share a 2-bedroom apartment with a guy named Liam. Before moving in, I didn't know him at all. We connected through a Facebook housing group. When we first met to check out the apartment, he seemed fairly ordinary. He was quiet, polite, and a little awkward, but nothing that raised any red flags. At the time, I actually thought that was ideal. I wasn't looking to make a close friend, just to live with someone dependable who would split the rent and not wreck the place. For the first few months, everything went smoothly. Our work schedules were completely opposite. I worked a standard 9-to-5 office job, while he worked late nights at a warehouse. Because of that, we hardly ever saw each other. In the mornings when I left for work, his bedroom door was usually closed. In the evenings when I got home, he was often already gone. We'd only run into each other once or twice a week, usually exchanging a few brief words in the kitchen or living room. It wasn't anything remarkable, but it worked well enough. After a while, though, I began to notice small things in my bedroom that didn't feel right. The first time, I came home late and noticed my closet door was open. I normally keep it shut because I don't like seeing my clothes hanging out, but I assumed I might have left it that way earlier. A few days later, I saw that my desk chair had been turned slightly toward my bed. I never position it like that. Once again, I tried to ignore it, thinking I probably just hadn't paid attention. Still, it left me with an uneasy feeling, like someone had been inside my room without me knowing. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning my room. I wiped down the shelves, dusted everything, and then moved on to the window. That's when I noticed something strange. In the corner where the wall met the ceiling, there was a small black dot. At first, I assumed it might be a screw or a tiny hole, but when I got closer, my body went cold. It was a miniature camera, a small wireless camera aimed directly at my bed. My hands were trembling as I pulled it off the wall. It wasn't even well concealed, just attached with a small piece of adhesive. There was a slot for a memory card, but the card itself was gone. I stood there holding the camera, feeling nauseous. My mind raced through all the nights I had spent in that room, sleeping, changing clothes, even being intimate with women. The only person who could have installed it was Liam. He was the only other person who had access to my room. At the time, he wasn't home. His bedroom door was shut and the apartment was completely quiet. I stood in the hallway staring at his door, my heart pounding. I kept telling myself not to, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowly turned his doorknob and pushed the door open. His room smelled stale, like old food mixed with dirty laundry. The blinds were closed and the room was dark despite it being midday. His bed was messy, and his desk was covered in papers, loose change, and unopened mail. I looked around briefly, expecting to find another camera or maybe recordings on his laptop, but nothing obvious stood out. It was just a cluttered, unkempt room. I closed the door and went back to my own room, but the sense of unease wouldn't leave me. I decided to test him. I placed the camera inside my nightstand drawer, tucked underneath some socks. My idea was straightforward. If he came searching for it, I'd have confirmation that he was the one who planted it. For the next 2 nights, nothing happened. I was still on edge, but since there were no signs of anything strange, I began to wonder if I was overthinking everything. Then, the 3rd night came. I woke up around 3 a.m. At first, I didn't know why I'd stirred, but then I heard a sound. It was faint, like wood sliding against wood. A moment later, I realized it was coming from right next to me, from my nightstand drawer. I cracked my eyes open slightly, pretending to stay asleep. In the dim light filtering through the blinds, I saw someone standing there. It was Liam. He was inside my room, leaning over my nightstand, digging through the drawer where I had hidden the camera. My chest tightened, and my heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I stayed completely still, frozen and unsure of what to do. Then, he stopped moving. He froze in place, standing perfectly still. Slowly, he turned his head toward my bed. He was staring directly at me. For a brief moment, I thought he might be unsure whether I was awake. Then he spoke and said he knew I was awake. Hearing that sent a chill straight down my spine. He then asked me what I had done with it. I immediately sat up, my fear quickly turning into anger. I demanded to know why he had put a camera in my room. He looked at me and claimed he did it because he thought I was stealing from him. I told him that excuse was ridiculous and made no sense. I pointed out that the camera was aimed at my bed and told him it was one of the sickest things I'd ever encountered. He tried to justify himself by saying he just wanted proof, but I didn't believe him. I accused him of lying and spying on me. We started shouting back and forth. He kept insisting that I was overreacting. I told him I was going to report him to the landlord and possibly even the police. My voice was shaking, fueled by both fear and rage. Finally, I ripped open the drawer, grabbed the camera, and held it up, telling him it was evidence and that he would never get it back. I stormed out of my bedroom, went into the kitchen, and threw the camera straight into the trash, thinking I had broken it. I warned him to stay out of my room and told him that the next day I would be informing the landlord about everything. Liam stood in the hallway with his fists clenched, staring at me with a completely blank expression. Without saying another word, he turned around and went back into his room. I didn't sleep at all for the rest of that night. I stayed on the couch with the TV on, too scared that he might come back into my room. Every small noise in the apartment made me jump. When morning finally came, I checked the trash can. The camera was gone. That was a week ago. I told the landlord everything that happened. He said he would look into it, but so far, nothing has changed. Liam is still living here. We don't talk, but the way he looks at me whenever we pass each other makes my skin crawl. It feels like he's waiting for me to say or do something. I still don't know his real reason for putting the camera in my room. His claim about me stealing was clearly a lie. I have no idea what he wanted to record or what his intentions were, and honestly, I don't want to know. Every night when I lie down in bed, though, I can't shake the fear that there might be more cameras hidden around me, maybe in places I wouldn't even think to check. I searched the entire room and couldn't find anything else, but the thought still lingers in my mind. Last night, I was up late when I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. They stopped right outside my door. For more than a minute, there was nothing but silence, except for the faint creaking of the wooden floor from the pressure of someone standing there. He stood outside my door for a couple of minutes like a creep before I finally heard his footsteps move away. I'm currently trying to figure out how to move out as soon as possible. I'm also looking into whether it's even possible to press charges for invasion of privacy or something similar. The problem is, I didn't think to take a photo of the camera or record our confrontation. I don't have any text messages from him admitting he placed it there. I have basically no evidence at all. Still, I'm hoping for the best, because right now, I honestly have no idea how this situation is going to end. I was 22 years old when this happened. I'd just finished college and hadn't landed a full-time job yet. While I was figuring things out, I made money by doing random cash jobs around my small town. Babysitting, cleaning houses, running errands, basically anything I could find that paid. A woman I had dog sat for before recommended me to a friend of one of her neighbors. His name was Bob. One afternoon, he called and explained that he was going to be out of town for a week and needed someone to stay at his house to take care of his golden retriever, Rex. He told me Rex was a nervous dog and did much better when someone stayed overnight instead of just stopping by to feed him. The pay he offered was higher than what I usually made, so I agreed. I met Bob 2 days later. He was in his late 40s, tall, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a windbreaker. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him. He might have been a bit overly friendly, but nothing that seemed creepy. His house was located on the edge of town, set back in a wooded area. It was a nice house, though a little outdated, with beige carpeting and floral curtains. He showed me around, explaining how often Rex needed to go outside, where the spare key was kept, and what food in the fridge I was allowed to use. He told me I could sleep in the guest bedroom, which was just off the living room on the first floor. I started the job on a Monday. The first 2 nights were completely uneventful. I watched TV in the living room, took Rex on his evening walks, and then went to sleep in the guest room with Rex curled up at the foot of the bed. Everything changed on the 3rd night. I was sitting on the bed scrolling through my phone when something caught my attention. On the dresser across from the bed, next to a small lamp, was a digital alarm clock. I remember thinking it looked out of place. It appeared newer than everything else in the room, black plastic with a bright blue LED display, while the rest of the decor felt like it was straight out of the early 2000s. I'm not sure why I decided to look more closely. Maybe it was how the lamplight reflected off it. As I leaned in, I noticed a tiny, perfectly round black hole just above the numbers. At first, I assumed it was some kind of sensor, but then I realized the angle of it. That small hole was aimed directly at the bed. My stomach dropped. I'd read stories about hidden cameras disguised as alarm clocks, but I had never encountered one in real life. My thoughts started spiraling. I picked the clock up and noticed it was heavier than expected, and I could hear a faint buzzing inside, like a tiny fan running. I turned it toward my face and stared straight into the small black opening. That's when Rex, who had been lying near the door, suddenly lifted his head and began whining. At the same time, I heard a sound from elsewhere in the house, not the front door, but deeper inside. It was unmistakably the sound of a door closing. Every hair on my body stood on end. Bob wasn't supposed to return until Sunday, and it was only Wednesday night. I froze, still holding the clock, my heart pounding painfully hard. Then, I heard slow footsteps moving down the carpeted hallway. I quickly placed the clock back where it was and rushed to the bedroom door, locking it just as the footsteps stopped outside. Bob's voice came through the door. He sounded calm, though slightly out of breath. He said he had left something in the room the last time he was home and needed me to open the door. I couldn't bring myself to respond. A moment later, he said it wasn't what I thought and claimed the device was just a motion sensor for the dog, insisting he hadn't mentioned it earlier because he didn't want to scare me. I stepped back from the door, covering my mouth with my hand. He told me to come out so we could talk like adults. When I didn't answer, his knocking became aggressive pounding. His voice shifted from calm to sharp and angry as he yelled for me to open the door. Rex began barking and jumping at the door, which only seemed to make Bob more upset. I looked toward the window. It was low enough to climb out of, but it was locked. My hands were shaking so badly that it took 3 tries to open the latch. Behind me, Bob continued pounding, now shouting that if I didn't open the door, he would get the key and call the police, claiming I had broken into his house. I didn't stick around to hear anything else. I shoved the window open, climbed out awkwardly, and dropped onto the grass outside. Rex tried to follow me, his nails scraping against the window ledge, but he didn't jump out. I ran through the side yard and down the gravel driveway until I reached the road. I still had my phone in my pocket, so I called my mom, who lived about 15 minutes away, and told her to come get me immediately. By the time she arrived, I was hiding behind a cluster of mailboxes. I couldn't see Bob's house from there, but I kept nervously looking over my shoulder. I stayed at my mom's house for the rest of the night. The next morning, I blocked Bob's number and contacted a lawyer. The lawyer explained that without physical evidence, such as the camera itself or recordings from it, pressing charges would be extremely difficult. Even if the clock was a hidden camera, Bob could argue it was simply a motion sensor. Without proof, it would come down to my word against his. I considered going back to take a picture of the device, but my lawyer strongly advised me not to return to the house alone. The thought of seeing Bob again made my skin crawl, so nothing ever happened to him. I never received payment for the 3 nights I worked. The woman who had referred me to him stopped responding to my messages, and I never found out whether she knew anything about his behavior. For weeks afterward, I had nightmares about waking up to a camera lens staring at me from across the room. I became paranoid, checking every alarm clock, smoke detector, and picture frame in my own apartment. Even now, I can't forget the moment I looked into that tiny black lens, or the sound of a door closing somewhere behind me in a house I believed was empty. It still makes me think that he may have been there the entire time, watching me through that camera. I reserved the Airbnb toward the end of September, about a week before my girlfriend Lisa and I were scheduled to spend a few days visiting her sister in a small town roughly 3 hours away from where we lived. I chose that place because it was inexpensive, close enough to her sister's house, had solid reviews, and looked comfortable in the listing photos. It was described as an old 2-story home with a wraparound porch, warm yellow lighting in the living room, hardwood floors that gave it a fairy tale-like charm, and one small note in the description that didn't seem important at the time. Guests were not allowed to access the basement storage room. I'd stayed in rentals before where certain areas were restricted, usually because the owners stored personal belongings there, so it didn't strike me as unusual. But when we arrived just before sunset on the first evening, the house appeared more worn than it did in the photos. There was also something unsettling about how isolated it was. Only one other house was visible far off in the distance, and the property was surrounded by dark tree lines with a narrow road leading in, which made me hesitate for a moment. The host, Alan, was already waiting for us on the porch before we even stepped out of the car. He was tall but slightly stooped, probably in his late 50s, with thin gray hair neatly combed over. He wore a perfectly pressed flannel shirt tucked into his jeans. He smiled at us, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, almost too polished, like something rehearsed. His gaze lingered on us a bit too long when we shook hands. Although his voice sounded friendly, there was a subtle firmness beneath it as he began showing us around. He led us through the front door into a hallway that smelled faintly of dust mixed with something sweet, almost like candle wax, though I didn't see any candles. The living room had a large couch facing an older television. The kitchen was clean but outdated. Upstairs, there was a single bedroom with a large bed beneath a ceiling fan and a small dresser with a mirror. When we returned downstairs, Alan stopped at a door near the kitchen and tapped a heavy padlock hanging from it. In a noticeably more authoritative tone, he told us that the door was to remain locked, that it was his storage space, and that there was absolutely no reason for us to go down there. This time, he didn't smile. He simply moved on, pointed out where the extra towels were in the bathroom, wished us a pleasant stay, and then left through the front door. After he was gone, Lisa and I unpacked, made some tea, and sat on the porch for a while, listening to crickets and the occasional rustling of leaves in the trees. By the time we went to bed, the quiet felt almost unsettling. No traffic, no distant voices, just complete silence. Sometime after midnight, I thought I heard a faint, dull thud coming from below us. I stopped and listened, but it didn't happen again, so I convinced myself it was just the house settling. The next morning, we went into town for breakfast, browsed a few shops, and met up with Lisa's sister for lunch. We stayed out until just after dark, then returned to the house to cook dinner and watch a movie. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. As I was heading back upstairs, I froze halfway up the staircase when I heard a dragging sound coming from the basement, like something heavy being pulled across a rough floor. It lasted about 5 seconds, stopped, and then started again. My first thought was that Alan might have come back to retrieve something, but he had specifically said he wouldn't be around during our stay. I stood there listening until the noise stopped, then went into the bedroom and quietly asked Lisa if she was awake. She whispered that she was, and that she had heard it too. We stayed awake for another 30 minutes, but the sound didn't return. The second night was worse. We had spent the day hiking and were completely exhausted, but around 2:30 a.m., the noises started again. This time, it wasn't dragging. It was footsteps. 4 or 5 steps in a row, then a pause, then 3 more. Each pause lasted just long enough to make it feel like whoever, or whatever, was down there was listening. Lisa whispered that she thought she could hear breathing between the steps. My heart was racing. but I didn't want to move and risk making noise. We lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling until morning. By the third morning, the house felt different. We still went out and did tourist activities, but every time we returned, it felt like a heavy presence settled over the rooms. During the day, I decided to check the basement door. It was still locked, but when I leaned closer, I noticed a faint, unpleasant smell. Stale, damp air mixed with something slightly sour. That night, the noises started earlier, around midnight. First, there was a faint metallic clinking sound, like metal lightly tapping against something hard. Then, the footsteps returned, on and off, for nearly an hour. Lisa barely spoke before we went to bed. The fourth night was what finally pushed us over the edge. While getting ready for bed, Lisa suddenly stopped brushing her hair and asked if the smoke detector above the bed looked strange to me. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual, but when I stood on the bed to get a closer look, I saw a small, perfectly round black dot in the center that was shinier than the surrounding plastic. A wave of dread hit me instantly. I grabbed a chair and unscrewed the smoke detector. Inside, there was a small battery-powered camera with a green light glowing. Lisa sat on the bed, pale and silent, while I searched the rest of the room. I found another tiny lens hidden behind a hole in the wall near the dresser mirror. Both cameras were aimed directly at the bed. That was it. We stuffed our belongings into our bags without bothering to fold anything and left the house immediately without speaking to the host. We drove to the nearest gas station and called the police. 2 officers met us there, and we explained everything: the noises, the hidden cameras, the locked basement. They then followed us back to the house. The front door was unlocked. Technically, we were still allowed to be there since we had paid for 4 days. The officers entered with us and collected all the evidence, including the cameras, the memory cards, and any recording equipment they found. They took detailed statements from us and asked if anything unusual had happened during our stay. That's when we told them about the strange noises we'd heard from the basement on multiple nights. When we showed them the basement door, we were shocked to find it standing wide open. It was completely dark down there. We explained that the door had previously been locked and that the host had been very strict about us not going down there. The officers went downstairs to investigate. Moments later, we heard raised voices and some kind of commotion from below. It quickly became clear that something serious was happening. The officers then called us downstairs and asked if we recognized the person they had found. To our horror, it was Alan. He had been hiding in a closet in the basement. Inside that closet was a monitor, which we assumed was connected to the camera feeds. The police seized that as well. Alan was arrested almost immediately and charged by the state with criminal trespass and invasion of privacy. We didn't have to testify in court. The police simply forwarded our statements to the prosecutor. Airbnb later offered us a voucher, which felt like an attempt to keep us from sharing what happened. We accepted it, of course, but that hasn't stopped us from telling others about this terrifying experience. It's had a lasting impact on both Lisa and me. We no longer trust short-term rentals or Airbnbs and now stick exclusively to hotels.